All right, grade eights, this is a review for section 1.2. We're going to be talking about prime factors. And in order to look at prime factors, we got to realize what a prime number is. So a prime number, surprise, is a number that only has two whole number factors. And those factors have to be 1 and itself. So for example, the number 2, the number 3, the number 5, the number 7, even the number 83, those can only be divided into whole numbers of themselves and 1. For example, 4 could not be a prime number because it would be divided by 2 as well as 4 and itself, or as well as 4 and 1. Is 1 a prime number? No, it is not a prime number because they need to be divided by 1 and itself, and they have to have two different factors. 1 can only be divided by 1. That's it. So what's the difference between a factor and a multiple? A factor is what makes up a number. That is to say that the numbers that multiply together to make the number. So, for example, two factors of the number 20 are 5 and 4. What are some other factors of the number 20? Let's think about this. 10 and 2, and 20 and 1. Those are both other factors. A multiple is different than a factor. A multiple is when you multiply the number by 2, 3, 4, even 1. And an example of a multiple of 3 is 6, 9, 12, 15. So if you listed the 5 multiples of the number 8, you would have 8, 16, 24, etc., etc. So it's kind of confusing sometimes when we take a look at multiples and factors. It's really important that we memorize what they actually are. And one way to remember that is to remember that multiples are always going to be bigger than the actual number that you're looking at. And factors of that number are always going to be smaller. So they're always going to be divided, and multiples are always going to be multiplied. So let's take a look at an example. If you have 20, my factors are 2, 4, 5, 10, and 20. Also 1. 1 would be a factor. My multiples would be 40, 60, 80, and 100. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking down numbers into their prime factors. So here we have an example of the number 8. And when we're breaking it down, well, we break it into its factors, 4 and 2. And what we notice is that when we're breaking down numbers into prime factors, that we have to break down all factors until they are prime factors. So 2 is a prime factor. 4 is not a prime factor, which means we need to break it down some more. So right here, 8 was broken down into 4 and 2. 2 is just a prime factor, so we bring it down. We don't do anything with that. And 4 can be broken down into 2 and 2, and therefore we have 2 times 2 times 2. We have successfully broken down the number 8 into its prime factors. However, we're not going to write 2 times 2 times 2 because there's an easier way of doing that, and we use exponents to do so. So once factors can no longer be factored, we write the common numbers in exponential form. So for the number 8 in its prime factors is 2 to the power of 3. Well, sometimes we're not just going to have the same number multiplied by itself. Sometimes we'll have other numbers, and I'm going to show you how to write those down. So for example, the number 24, if we break that down into its prime factors, well, it's going to be divided into 6 and 4. And then it's going to be divided, we can break those down into 3 times 2 for 6. And 4 can be broken down into 2 times 2. So we have 3 times 2 times 2 times 2. That gives us 24. When we're breaking it down into its prime factors in the exponential form, we're going to have 3 times 2 to the power of 3. Because there are 3 2's and there is 1 3. we do the exact same problem with 28, well, we can divide this into 7 times 4. 7 is now a prime factor, but 4 is not, so we would have to divide that into 2 and 2. And you can imagine that we would have 7 times 2 to the power of 2, because there are only 2 2's and 1 7. You can try breaking these down by yourselves. Okay, so just a quick review. What is the LCM? It's really important when we're talking about factors and multiples because it's going to really help us out, especially when we're looking at two different numbers and we want to find something that they have the same. So the LCM stands for the lowest common multiple. There are many ways to find the lowest common multiples between numbers. And we're going to look at 3 different ways of doing that. The first one is to list it. The second one is to create a Venn diagram. And the third is to do prime factor multiplication. So let's take a look at number 1. You can just list all of the factors of certain numbers until you find the lowest common multiple. So, for example, 36, we would list all of the multiples, 36, 72, 108, 144, 180, 216. For 45, we would also list all of their multiples, and then we would take a look and see to find out which ones are in common. And you would see that 180 is common for both. The second thing that you could do is you could break them down just how we did before into their prime factors. And if they had any common ones, what we could do is we could throw them into a Venn diagram. And with the Venn diagram, we would note where we would cancel out numbers that are in common and put them in the common area in a Venn diagram. So you would see that you have 3 and 3. And then what I would do is I would multiply all of my other numbers, and I would only use the 3 and the 3 once, rather than using it twice. So I would do 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5, and that would also give me 180. The last method of doing this is prime factor multiplication, which technically is the exact same thing as the Venn diagram. However, what you do is you break down your numbers into their prime factors, and when you're done that, you take a look at their uncommon factors and their common factors, and you're going to multiply them together. However, if they have ones in common, you're only going to use that once, rather than using it twice. So, when trying to find the lowest common multiple between two numbers, you can combine factors and multiply them with uncommon factors. So common factors were 3 and 3, and you just have to list one of the pairs. So we had 2 common pairs. That means we're just going to list it 1 for each pair, rather than listing it 4 times. And we multiply it by the uncommon ones, which were 2 2's and a 5. And what you would notice is that you would get 180. So this has been a review of how to get your lowest common multiples, as well as using prime factors to do so. Thanks for watching.